To the DES Pharma Podcast, where we decode regulatory shifts, review pharma news, and talk pharma tech ops. I'm your host, Matt Pontrelli, and today I'm with Mead and Isaac, and today our discussion will be about pharmaceutical companies investing in CDMOs. So allow me to introduce Mead Madhaw, who is our process development and CMC lead, and Isaac Jagannathan, our supply chain and procurement lead. Quick disclaimer, this is not regulatory or legal advice. Always consult with your own advisors and engage with the FDA directly for your specific programs. All right, so now jumping in. All right, so we're going to jump in with the most favorable nation's executive order. So on May 12, 2025, the White House issued a new executive order aimed at ending what it called global freeloading on drug prices. So this order established most favored nations policy for the U.S., and it demanded that drug manufacturers give American patients the same low prices that they offered to other countries. So, overall, a lot of pharmaceutical countries were, developing these products in the U.S. and then selling them raw cheaper than they were in the U.S. And this executive order was aimed at it. It took aim at 5 target priorities that had to be implemented. Essentially, if the industry didn't meet these new price targets, the administration was threatening a suite of aggressive measures. So ranging from legalizing international drug importation, launching antitrust investigations, to potentially revoking drug approvals. So it was a bold move, happened halfway through the year in 2025, and it led to a lot of deals, a lot of direct-to-consumer initiatives. And what we're going to begin our conversation on is the latest news drop, which was that J&J just dropped $2 billion into Fujifilm's North Carolina facility. So the open question here is, what's happening? So I'll leave that to you, Isaac.
Thank you, Matt. Let me start by saying the biopharmaceutical industry has never been without risk. And you started to mention a few of them, and let's just be clear, right? So as far as we got FDA regulations, several of the newest FDA regulations are very quickly approaching the sunrise period. Pricing pressures, they remain high. They've been high in the past. They're maybe even increasing, and even maybe more pressures to keep on pricing. And again, there's a huge ticket item out there right now. It's the domestic tariffs, right? There's really no getting around that. There's a lot of concern over that, and hopefully this helps alleviate some of that concern. Look, the important thing to remember is on the other side of the risks, there's also great opportunities, and I think that's what we're seeing here. The $2 billion into Fujifilms in North Carolina from a mega player like Johnson & Johnson is fantastic for the industry. As far as biotech investments go, I really do think you can say that you get what you pay for. We're talking about investment of great magnitude. We're going to get latest and greatest state-of-the-art facility build-out in Holly Springs, North Carolina. You have an opportunity to really use this time of site shutdown to implement any kind of improvements that you needed to implement from the original build out, and I want to say 2021 timeframe. So now you have the new investments. You have an opportunity to improve upon the existing investments, and also let's remember people. There's an enormous amount of people coming in. I think the announcement said 700 new jobs are coming to the area as a result of this. Specifically, right? A U.S. facility expansion of this size means U.S. on-site jobs. This is a brick and mortar place. You're going to need people. You're going to need people in Holly Springs, North Carolina. And I'm sure the residents of Holly Springs that have been following this are extremely excited right now about this. And it's not just the folks that are involved with the facility, the expansion of the facility and the build out. It's also your local businesses, your dining establishments, your retail stores, your real estate. The list goes on. I mean, there's a lot of ancillary functions that go on in North Carolina that are going to see a lot of benefit from this level of investment.
Yeah, a huge amount of downstream effects for what we're calling essentially the CDMO investment surge. And Mead, let me pose this to you. Can you give us a little bit more context about this facility?
Sure, yeah. So, they haven't disclosed everything that they're going to be, adding to the site, right? Because it's internal. But the other facility investments that I think are worth mentioning is, Eli Lilly invested in the PA area, and Johnson & Johnson is doing an enormous cell therapy manufacturing build out also in the PA and North Jersey area. So basically your entire East Coast, if you include North Carolina, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, right? Boston's its own animal, as everybody knows. But the areas that were really kind of the more economical in terms of real estate have really seen, I think, massive investment, and it's kind of branching out from the main hubs into the outlying areas at this point.
Mead, really, I think that was quite insightful where you led off about Eli Lilly being the one of the latest companies to invest in ensuring that sites were being built up in the Pennsylvania area. J&J just announced the North Carolina, and this I want to connect over to the broader trend that really began with Pfizer and AstraZeneca's announcement back in October, where they were beginning with deals and commitments to investing in the U.S. So that led off to more than 10 of these large pharmaceutical companies making these commitments, and with so many of these large companies making these commitments, so much money driving into CDMOs and U.S.-based manufacturing, I wanted to ask you, how does this play out for small and medium pharma? How do these companies fare against the biggest of players? Is this increased throughput in the U.S. distributed across pharma, across all company sizes?
No, it's not. Yes, that's a very good. It's a very good question. I think you can look at the investment in two different ways, right? There's internal capacity build out, which that the initial tranche was, I think, Merck, not Eli, the ones you listed off, right? And that was internal capacity, right? And then there's the CDMO space, right, which is its own animal. The CDMO space, I would say, is at an inflection point. So there was enormous capacity build out post COVID that then didn't really get used, and there was a big contraction. Now, with the onshoring for biologics, I can tell you that basically those CDMOs are giving preferential treatment to the large players, right? So what that is going to do, right, is as you put the pressures on that Isaac brought up, right, where now your raw materials cost more, you no longer have the benefit of low cost manufacturing overseas. So who would incur the risk of manufacturing overseas with all of the transport risk, temperature excursion risk, all of that? So everyone is looking to onshore. So that's going to cause basically a contraction, right, in the amount of available manufacturing slots available, and it's going to disproportionately push the small time players to basically get pushed out even more. So it's just going to add increased pressure to the already limited manufacturing supply chain. The raw materials, I think nobody really knows, because to fully integrate the entire supply chain is near impossible. So that's going to be its own problem, as far as I'm concerned.
It's a really interesting take, and I'm very curious about how this plays out over the years. It doesn't take 1 year to overnight to really build out these CDMOs or manufacturing facilities. So it's definitely something that we'll have to watch and see. And about all this manufacturing onshoring, the White House Trump policies have triggered over 100 billion in commitments, U.S. facilities commitment in the U.S. J&J is doing 55 billion. AbbVie pledged over 100 billion for the decade. And the question that I am going to pose now is: do you see more risk or benefit from this level of investment?
I think whenever you see that level and at that level of expertise, and we're talking huge players in the industry, right? We're talking J&J, we're talking AbbVie, we're talking and with full commitment from the current administration. And we're not talking about like these short-term deals. It's a long-term strategy. It's something that once you make that type of an investment, you're going to want to see that end result. And these companies have been around for a very long time, very established, strong financials. And the way I look at this is there's a huge amount of opportunity. I think there's folks that are in the U.S. that are gearing up, that have a plan, that have a way to approach this, are going to see a lot of benefit. That level of money coming into a concentrated area, a growing area, area that has a strong need, I see an enormous amount of benefit, and I see very little risk.
No, that's a good take, and that just transfers me over to our last talking point for this discussion, which is DES Pharma has identified some headlines that I'd like to have you clarify about risks and how we see risk mitigation in 2026. So I'm going to pop them out. Post-pandemic inventory normalization, increased pricing pressures, and obviously the final.
Yeah, I'm glad you saved all the easy questions for me. Let's do this. Okay, post-pandemic inventory. I think here it's important to know that supply chain teams for pharma companies in this industry, they've been discussing, prepping, and putting a game plan in place for what the inventory would look like in the inventory picture post-pandemic. They've been discussing this for over 3 years now. And I think the important point to know is that it's imperative to have a strategy. If the company, if the group, if you're with that doesn't have a strategy, I would say get the experts in place right away to develop one. And it's super critical. It's always critical, but I think now it's absolutely imperative to have a crystal clear picture of your inventory levels. If you have inventory that's expiring soon, have a game plan. How are we going to do this? Are we going to sell it to companies that need it? Are we going to send it back? I mean, have a working plan in place for inventory and that's approaching expiry. Revamp and reassess your safety stock strategy. That's got to look different now. It cannot be the buy and grab as much as you can strategy during the pandemic era. It's got to be a little bit more strategic. And when you have that stockpile, you got to reassess what does that look like in today's norm. Supply chain professionals, again, they've been for decades. We just need to remember they've been dealing with this. They're very well equipped to navigate these waters. What the pandemic, I think, did was it shined a global spotlight on such a scale that we've never seen before. And now people are very well aware of the complexities, the risks of having this internationally dependent supply chain. And we've seen it at a level that we've never seen it before. I think again, some of the important points to note here: engage your team extremely early, get the right expertise, the right supply chain experts to ensure that you have a strategic readiness plan. Regarding pricing pressures, I don't think in my 25 plus years of being in the pharma industry, I don't think there was ever a time where there wasn't pricing pressures on the pharma industry. To me, this isn't new. Our procurement teams and supply chains have the tools. They know how to effectively optimize pricing. I think what we're talking about here is really, with all these increases and all this maybe global attention on pharmaceutical pricing, I think companies have to perhaps utilize these tools at an earlier stage in the life cycle than maybe they would have in the past. One quick example of how a strategy that they may consider building out is, if you're originally single source, maybe bring in dual and triple sourcing in earlier. That way you could leverage the multiple sources to competitively bid against each other and secure a more favorable pricing for your industry. And so that's one quick example. And there's others that your procurement and supply chain teams can help you with. And if they need ideas, that's where expert consultants like us come into play. And then finally, you mentioned tariffs. Okay, yeah, that's a headline topic. There's no getting around tariffs. I mean, that's something that it's gotten a lot of media attention. It kind of sucks up a lot of the air in the room when it comes up. But let's remember, tariffs don't necessarily get implemented immediately. It's not like a tariff is put into effect and you get the immediate results. And when and if, in fact, these tariffs do get implemented, because remember, it seems like this administration is using tariffs as a negotiation tool. So I do say if, right? I think the important point again here is to have a plan and not be scrambling at the last minute. Early on, do risk assessments. Understand your supply chain. Understand where the vulnerabilities are, where you are highly dependent on tariff impacted countries. And based upon your risk assessment, have a strategy. And the strategy can be a combination of things, or it can be one of those things, or any workable manner that your supply chain team comes up with based upon the risk assessment. For example, it may be a pull forward of existing inventory to get across the immediate impact of the tariffs, or the sunrise period of the tariffs coming into play. Or it might be having higher safety stock policies overall. Or it may even be, again, another example where dual sourcing of critical long lead time materials from multiple countries or non-tariff impacted countries may come into play as well. So any one of these, or even a combination of them, can probably help mitigate or at least lessen the impact of what these tariffs may or may not do if they get put into place.
Yeah, that was the insightful level of strategies that you just implemented for quite different headlines. But if I had to put a through line through all those, a lot that you've been talking about is in terms of like strategy and planning. Making sure that for post-pandemic inventory that you sort of out with the old plans that were really unsustainable, input new ones, and be forward thinking about inventory is have transparent understanding and engaging with experts to ensure that you have good strategy. In terms of pricing pressure, this is not something new, and supply chain experts can deal with this, but you have to be thoughtful about how to deal with these supply chain pressures and pricing pressures. And then in terms of reducing regarding tariffs, I appreciate that you said that you have to take a real world approach to it. You can't be always sure that these things are being used as negotiation tactics or going to be realizable things, and to implement risk assessments and strategy to mitigate what could be potential risks, and have plans in mind if this happens, how we're gonna move around that. So really well said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben.
So I think that closes out for this podcast today, and I am quite certain we're going to be revisiting all the changes in 2026 for all this investment and all the changes in supply chain and procurement over the year. So appreciate you, gentlemen, greatly, and thank you. And that's all. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.